This is a podcast from BFM 89.9, the business station.
You're listening to The Morning Run with Keith Kam and I'm Wong, Ning. It's 8:36, Wednesday, the 4th of December. And let's talk about the government's new low-cost housing initiative because they unveiled a 13 billion ringgit investment into an affordable housing project, the largest undertaking to date, with low-cost homes set to measure 800 square feet per unit and basics facilities provided. In support of the government, Housing and Local Government Minister Nga Kong Ming stated that the investment is a reflection of their commitment to make home ownership accessible for all tiers of citizens.
However, certain experts also believe that this initiative should highlight other crucial aspects such as financial aid for future home buyers and cushioning measures for existing ones to maximize its efficiency while maintaining stability on the property market. With that, the government has revealed With what the government has revealed, will the implementation of this project be effective, and how will all of this affect existing and potential homeowners in the long run?
For a deeper dive into this topic, we turn to Dr Carmelo Ferlito, CEO of the Centre for Market Education. Good morning, Carmelo. Thanks for speaking to us. Now, I know you've been writing about affordable housing for quite some time, but let's get your thoughts because it's been revealed about a week ago that 53% of civil servants don't even own their own homes. So how effective would this 13 billion ringgit investment in an affordable housing project set to be unveiled by our Prime Minister next month actually improve home ownership for Malaysians, including these civil servants?
Hi, good morning, and thanks for having me. Indeed, as you mentioned, I think I've been dealing with this topic since 2018, more or less. And unfortunately, I see that we have not moved too much forward in the tone of the conversation. We are still stuck on the same kind of ideological approach. My point is that I have two main points. One is home ownership a value in itself, or is a choice? And the second is that indeed pushing for home ownership is always another side of the coin, which is pushing for debt, for long-term financial commitment. So in my view, we should pursue a different kind of approach, which is growing more broadly the economy, pushing for social mobility rather than home ownership. So putting the people in the condition of growing their income so that they can afford to buy a house if they want. Because again, as I mentioned, home ownership has two kind of trade-offs. One is long-term financial commitment, and I think that in the current scenario of Malaysia, household debt is much more an issue than home ownership. Home ownership is close to 80%, and household debt is close to 90% of the GDP. So if I had to choose my priority, I would address household debt rather than home ownership. And the other is that obviously long-term financial commitment goes against the preference for mobility. So people may decide not to invest in home ownership because they want to keep their options, their working options open to move in different countries and in different situations.
But Carmelo, that requires, I think, a huge change of mindset, right? Because it's a very Asian mentality that the house is something you should buy. But at the same time, should we not then also address the housing market in the sense that there should be still, even if it's not to own, then that there's affordable homes to rent where there is protection for tenants? Is that it needs to go hand in hand, right? If we need to change that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that in these discussions on home affordability, the accent is always on ownership, and there is very little focus on rental solutions, which are indeed more consistent with the need for mobility. And I think we are experiencing, a generational change in which people may have a growing preference for rental than ownership, precisely to keep open their working options, their working opportunities.
Carmelo, if we go with what the government actually, still insists on doing is to develop affordable homes, do you reckon that there is enough thought on where these affordable homes are being built? What areas would you think would be the most ideal to develop projects like these so that Malaysians actually want to buy them affordable or not?
Well, as you can see, I think from the NAPIC data, you will find that a big chunk of the unsold homes are within what is defined as affordable homes. So there is a supply of homes and people are not buying. So there is probably the issue is not really price, is probably a shift in consumer preferences. It's not just the income issue, but probably a growing preference for rental and mobility, indeed, as I just mentioned. And to answer your question, I think that what is necessary, what are consumer preferences, emerge only in the market. And so it can't be. So you see, the problem is not building 1 million houses, 3 million houses, 1 billion houses. That is just a matter of technical possibilities. The issue is what the market needs, where these houses are needed, with which features, the size, location, and etc. And this is the result of a discovery process that happens only in the market and cannot be known in advance by policymakers. So every kind of urban policy approach should be reconciliate with signals that come from the market, and that this means with a higher involvement of the private sector.
Yeah, but then the argument is if you get the private sector involved, then perhaps the prices of these affordable homes might be too high, right? So is it a chicken and egg situation? Although maybe the private sector might be the most efficient in terms of deciding what works for segments of the market?
Yeah, indeed, the private sector is better placed, at the very least, to see what is needed and where. Then who is going to do it can be discussed. But also under that perspective, I think that the role of the government by embracing the perspective of social mobility rather than home ownership should be rather to support rental schemes where so that the government doesn't have a fixed cost but a variable cost that depends also on the conditions of people that benefit from these rental schemes. So in this, I think that rediscovering the works of Jane Jacobs would be extremely useful.
So this proposal for affordable housing in which the government is spending 13 billion ringgit, the largest investment in such a project, what sort of impact do you see this having on the broader Malaysian property market?
I think it can potentially create an issue of oversupply and crowding out the private sector from an important market segment. Eventually, you see what happened in Singapore, where it is true that there are social houses or houses provided by the government, but basically there is no room for the private sector to intervene even on the middle class segment because of that heavy intervention of the government has completely crowded out action for the private sector. And this is one point. And the second point I would like to make, I think that also on the affordable definition itself, we should probably expand our reflection, which is not just a matter of money. This is a criteria which, from the financial perspective, is extremely variable, region by region in the country. And second, we should start to include in our measurements social elements. Actually, myself and a colleague, Consil Stan, recently developed a new index for measuring home affordability, and it will be published in a book this month. So stay tuned for more.
You're not giving us a preview, are you, Carmelo?
Yeah.
But just in general, do you think that one of the reasons Malaysia is in this conundrum is, in the first place, when we look at the affordability in general of property, it is beyond the reach of many Malaysians? I think we do this comparison between annual income, the number of times of annual income. What does the data tell us?
Again, it may be, I mean, if we use that conventional index, which again, it should be more,
Nuanced.
dissected by different states. But again, even if we look at the market segment which falls within the affordability, the theoretical affordability that following that index, we still have a high number of unsold properties. So I think that here we have a broader issue, which is not just financial unaffordability, but probably a supply side that doesn't produce what the market needs, and a shifting in consumer preference from home ownership toward rental solutions that allow for a higher degree of flexibility.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. That was Dr. Carmelo Ferlito, CEO for the Center of Market Education, talking about his views on affordable housing. I think in the first place, we need to look at the definition of it, look at the available supply in the market, and ask ourselves some really hard questions as to why they aren't selling in the first place. And also, do we need to always insist that every Malaysian needs to own their own home?
Yeah, so there was a very interesting point he brought up as well, Carmelo brought up as well, the fact that our home ownership rate is at 80%.
Yep.
And I think that's pretty high. Singapore is 87%, and that's thanks to the HDB. So the conversation that I think a lot of us need to have is a proper rental agreement act, so to speak, to protect a tenancy agreement act to protect people who actually prefer to rent. You can actually check out some of the property shows that I've done on this topic. I've done 2 or 3 of them.
Love your plugs.
Yeah,
Never mind.
just go to the bfm.my and search for rental property show.
Although I do understand why some people like to buy property. I mean, it is technically
against inflation,
a hedge against inflation. So for some people it works, but I think it's definitely that might be changing over time. Stay tuned, BFM 89.9.
You have been listening to a podcast from BFM 89.9, the business station. For more stories of the same kind, download the BFM app.